صلى الله عليك وعلى أهل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة بن الحسن العسكري، فداه أرواح العالمين. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر، واجعلنا من أصحابه وأعوانه ومقوية سلطانه. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master, the Savior, the Avenger, Al-Imam Al-Mahdi, Al-Hujjat ibn Al-Hasan Al-Askari, recite Allah wa salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My respected sisters, if you look at the collections of hadith that our scholars have painstakingly and with great difficulty and immense precision and scholarship have put together, creating what we refer to as our hadith corpus, you'll find that in the most important classical collections of hadith, the way these narrations of the Holy Prophet and his immaculate progeny have been indexed, they almost always begin with a chapter that encompasses narrations about the intellect. This is true of the blessed book of Al-Kafi. It is true of the magnum opus of Allam al-Majlisi, known as Bihar al-Anwar, where the very first chapter is a derivative of something that sounds like Kitabul Aqli wal Jahl. It's something along those lines. So it's about aql, it's about the intellect. Now, we hear about aql, and oftentimes when we see someone who is perhaps mentally challenged, we say that this person lacks intellect, lacks aql. But exactly what do we mean when we speak about aql? The best English translation is the intellect. And so when someone is highly educated, they say this person is an intellectual. But this term, I think, doesn't do justice to what we refer to as aql. Because aql in the Arabic language comes from iqal. Those of you who are familiar with Arab customs and the way traditional people in the Arab world dress, you'll be familiar with what we call iqal. In colloquial Iraqi accent, they say aqal. What is the iqal? Iqal is a very tight knit, thick rope that goes over the head. But the root of the term aql goes further than that. If you look at the Arab lexicology and dictionaries, you'll find that it is often translated as a rope that was used to tie up the hands and feet, the legs of a camel. So they say عقال الجمل. So when they're trying to transport, for example, a camel, or they're trying to perhaps sacrifice or slaughter the camel, they tie their hands and legs. So I think it's become a little clearer what the term means, which is why we have a hadith from the Holy Prophet in which he says, Al-aqlu iqalun min al-jahl. Aql is something with which you restrain the individual against acting out of ignorance. So, again, it's becoming clearer now. Aql is restraint. Aql is what binds an individual and prevents that person from doing things that would contravene and contradict that which is rational, logical, that which is right, that which is good. So next time you see someone who's really smart and is doing well in school and has high marks in their exams, you don't refer to that person as aqil. Rather, that person might have what we refer to as dhuka. Dhuka means smart. And smart means someone who's able to process information rather quickly. You'll tell them one thing and they'll pick up on it. They'll understand what you're telling them. And perhaps they have the ability to retain the information longer. So they have a better memory. That's being smart, right? But aqil is someone who can tell apart right from wrong and act upon that which is right and refrain from that which is wrong. Somebody comes to Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, mal aql? And the Imam says to him, Al-aqlu ma iktusiba bihi al-jinan. Aql is that which allows you to acquire heavenly reward and please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ma ubida bihi al-Rahman wa iktusiba bihi al-jinan. So the man is a little confused. Again, he conflates aql with being smart and shrewd and cunning. Someone who's really good in business, for example, right? We might refer to that person as being aqil. But again, there's conflation happening here. So he says to the Imam, وَالَّذِي كَانَ فِي مُعَاوِيَةٍ. What about the shrewdness of Muawiyah? He was a strategist. He was extremely smart. Unlike some of our present day world leaders, Muawiyah was actually smart in battle, in the techniques of warfare, in trying to create alliances, in buying people's conscience and threatening certain individuals who wouldn't be lured with money, but rather if you threaten to kill them or their family, they'll probably budge and cave. So he was a very shrewd man. He says to the Imam, the thing that Muawiyah had, is that also part of aql? The Imam said, La, that's not aql. إنها النكراء إنها الشيطنة. That was being shrewd. That was being driven by satanic desires and trying to reach your goals and objectives at any cost. وهي شبيهة بالعقل وليست بالعقل. It is similar to the intellect. It's similar to the aql, but it's not. It's not the same. Why? Because the ultimate objective of the aql is to allow you to reach paradise. What Muawiyah had does the exact opposite. It is being shrewd and smart and gives you the ability to process all the information, but doesn't tell you what's right from what's wrong. Or if it does, it doesn't lead you toward that which is correct and good and righteous. Someone comes to Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam. Listen to this hadith. Again, you'll find these in the opening chapters of the books of Al-Kafi and Bihar and others. Highly recommended read, by the way. If you take those initial chapters and read through them and contemplate and think about them, they're extremely beneficial and enlightening. So he comes to the Imam. He says to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I have a neighbor, MashaAllah. You should see his prayers. You should see how he fasts and observes the holy month of Ramadan. You should see how he performs Hajj and Umrah and Ziyarah. I'm adding this from myself. But just generally, he painted a very rosy picture of this individual's religiosity, meaning acts of devotion, acts of prayer and worship. The Imam ignored all of that and asked him one specific question. He said to him, Ya hada kayfa aqluh? How is his aql? So the man responded by saying, I don't think he has a very, for lack of a better term, obvious strength in that department. Meaning that when it comes to acts of worship, he's great. But when it comes to this faculty, he doesn't stand out. He's a relatively simple person when it comes to utilizing his aql. And so the Imam said to him, إِنَّ الْمَثُوبَةَ عَلَى قَدَرِ الْعَقْلِ. He said, thawab is measured not by the acts of worship that you perform, although all of those are great. For someone to get up in the middle of the night, disturb his or her own sleep and comfort in order to perform ablution and stand in the direction of the Qibla and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nawafil and salatul layl, that is wonderful. No one is discounting the value of acts of worship. But the Imam gives him a measuring stick, a standard by which you can evaluate all of those acts. إِنَّ مَثُوبَةَ عَلَى قَدَرِ الْعَقْلِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards an individual for all of those good deeds based on how much aql they have. Another person came to the Imam, said something similar about someone else, and the Imam asked him, كَيْفَ عَقْلُهُ? He said, not much. I can't really speak to how much aql he has. So the Imam said to him, even though he praised his acts of worship and his good deeds and charity and volunteering and whatnot, the Imam then said to him, لا يرتفع كثير من ذلك. All those good deeds that he performs, all of those acts of worship that she performs, the Imam says, much of that won't benefit him. It won't really be lifted to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for remuneration. Let me give you an example to illustrate this. Imagine someone builds a rocket, a beautiful rocket, big, massive, engineered to the max, everything with the pointy tip. But this rocket lacks a fuel cell. Without the fuel, whether it be liquid, solid, and thanks to the last couple of years, suddenly we know the difference between solid fuel and liquid fuel and the different speeds of rockets, whether it's Mach 5 or Mach 6. But think about it. You have the rocket and the amount of engineering and precision manufacturing that's got into the rocket is wonderful. But you've disregarded the fuel that's required to lift the rocket into the air and perhaps into outer space. What use will that rocket serve other than being placed in some museum for people to come and marvel at the height or the breadth or the large nature of the rocket? It's useless. Aql, my dear respected sisters, is the fuel that lifts up our actions, which is exactly what Imam al-Sadiq says to this man. لا يرتفع الكثير من ذلك. He or she is performing all of these good deeds, but it's not making a difference. It's not benefiting this individual because of their lack of aql. Now, having said all of this, you might be left wondering and asking, first of all, how is a lack of aql reflected in a person's life? How did these individuals know that the person they were praising for their acts of worship doesn't have much of aql to speak of? And the answer is that at the extreme end of it, someone who lacks aql is someone who does the stupidest things in public. You know immediately that this person is not aql. This person lacks an intellectual capacity because they do things, they say things. For example, they might run around naked, right? Some people are afflicted by that. SubhanAllah, I just remembered a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw there's a crowd surrounding a person and they're laughing and cheering and making fun and whatnot. The Prophet said, who is this? They said, Ya Rasulullah, innahu majnoon. This person is insane. This person is crazy. And the Prophet said, innahu laysa bimajnoon. Innahu mubtala. This person is afflicted, meaning that they have a pathological and it could be a chemical imbalance in the brain, it could be a birth defect, it could be a deformity, it could be the result of an accident, right, where they hit their head against the wall, or it could be the result of a stroke that prevented blood flow to the brain and actual brain cells died, and so the brain isn't able to process, and so they start doing things. And so the Prophet said, this person is afflicted. He or she just doesn't have the ability to understand and process and regulate their actions. And so you see them doing things that are irregular, out of whack, strange, peculiar, funny, and you make fun of him. That's not someone that you should be poking fun at. The Imam said, it is the Prophet rather, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, the one who has the intellectual capacity but fails to use it, that's someone that you should be studying and you should be observing in order to avoid making the same pitfalls. This person is just insane. Clinically, they're unable to process information. So that's at the extreme end of it. But let's take more practical examples. Let's come back to earth. If you observe someone, and I would urge you to observe yourself before you try and judge other people. مَيْدَانُكُمُ الْأَوَّلْ أَنفُسُكُمْ, the hadith says. Your battlefield is your own self. It's easy to look at someone else and pick out problems in their behavior or acts of disobedience and sin and so on. It's really easy to pass judgment on other people. But start with yourself. The actions that we perform, the question you need to ask yourself, no matter how small and seemingly insignificant, every time you're about to do something, ask yourself, and it could be turned into a habit. It could become something that you could quickly analyze without, dwelling too much over it. Ask yourself, is this something that my intellect is calling me to do? Or is it something else? Because we have a lengthy hadith, which I can't get into and might take a whole series to discuss, that is often referred to as Junudul Aqli wal Jahl. The Imam speaks about 40 soldiers in the army of Aql, meaning these are reinforcements for the intellect. They help the intellect get stronger and ultimately achieve victory against ignorance. And ignorance is also the general that has an army of 40 very strong lieutenants, and the Imam lists them one by one, right? So the question you need to ask is, the action I'm about to undertake right now, the word I'm about to utter right now, the response I'm going to display towards this phenomenon, this issue that's just happened in physical reality, is this stemming from my intellect, which, as we said earlier, means restraint. It means to, by the way, sometimes restraint means that you should take action. Restraint against negative actions, but restraint against not taking positive actions. Does that make sense? If somebody sees someone drowning and says, you know what, my intellect tells me that I shouldn't put myself at risk, by helping this person will tell this individual that it's not your aql telling you to do this. This is your desire telling you. This is your survival instinct telling you not to intervene, not to help out. So the aql restrains you from ignorance. It doesn't restrain you from taking action, if the action is a positive one and one that is deemed good and righteous and moral in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, again, just try and give you some practical examples in the little time that I have. Aql should tell you that in order for me, and we've been talking about this, and it's been kind of a theme over the last 3 days or so. Why am I trying to beautify myself in public? Is it the aql telling me this? Or is it desire? Or is it craving for attention? Or is it seeking validation? Or is it me trying to fit in and conform and be accepted by society using their own flawed standards? What is it? And if you employ the faculty of aql, you'll see that your life will become drastically different. Another example, a husband and wife get into a fight. They have a disagreement. It's not still up at the level of a fight. Inshallah, it never gets there. But they have a disagreement. The husband says something that might hurt the feelings of his wife, right? Maybe he references something about her mother or her brothers or what have you, right? It happens. Your role here is not to say that he said this, the natural response should be this. He hurt me, I should hurt him. The response should be, what does the aql instruct me to do right now? If the aql says that you should restrain yourself, you should hold yourself back, you shouldn't respond instinctually. Because one of the soldiers of ignorance is instinct, which is animalistic in nature. Your instinct says that you should respond kind in kind. If you're insulted, you should insult them back. But the aql is different. You've all heard the story when somebody came to Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam and he said to him, Anta Baqar. Imam Al-Baqir's title is Al-Baqir, which means the one that plows through knowledge. يبقر العلم بقرة. Have you seen a plowing machine? You don't have much snow here in London, but elsewhere they have snow plows. Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam plowed through knowledge and opened up new avenues and new disciplines and new fields of knowledge. If you study the Imam's history and seerah, you'll see what a major point of deflection happened. It was a turning point in the history of Islam, thanks to Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam. Al-Baqirain, Imam Al-Baqir and Imam Al-Sadiq. So he comes to the Imam. Imagine Hujjatullah, Imam, Ma'soom. He says to him, Anta Baqar. The Imam didn't respond to him. Restraint, aql. He then said to him, Anta Baqar. The Imam didn't reply. Then he said to him, Iyaka a'ni. I'm talking to you. Have you seen how sometimes in gatherings, especially women's gatherings, someone might look at someone and it's just a gesture, right? They don't actually speak the words. They don't utter anything. But with that gesture, it speaks volumes. Oh yeah, that one. Na'udhu billah. This is just as haram. To hurt someone by making a gesture. And so this man was not being subtle about it. It wasn't just a gesture. It was elevated to the level of an actual deeply hurtful insult to the hujjah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Imam ignored him, he tried to attract his attention. He said, Iyaka ani, I'm talking to you. The Imam said to him, Wa'anka ughdi, and I'm ignoring you. It's these little things, my respected sisters. If you see someone, for example, again, how were these people? Well, when I'm reading the ahadith, I'm thinking when the Imam asks him, to evaluate this person's intellect. How did they know? And this allows you to detect those points of weakness in your own intellect through your own actions. When you see yourself, for instance, being overly obsessed with your appearance and the way you look, number one. Overly obsessed with how people perceive you. Overly obsessed, again, there's nothing wrong with looking good in front of other women, attracting attention. Why not? But being obsessed with this means that you'll begin to cross some major red lines. Being obsessed with your fashion, right? Your clothes, your accessories, your bag, your shoes. Again, you will be able to look at someone who does this and immediately recognize a lack of aql. You're like, what's wrong with you? What, shoes that cost 300, 400, 500? Why? What's the big deal? A shoe is a shoe. It's supposed to make you walk comfortably. That's the whole point of a shoe. Or if you see someone who has like one of those designer bags, for example, and I have my own theory about these designer labels and why they could be haram to purchase. And I spoke about that in the last Fatimiyya in South London. You can look it up. But I don't want to talk about that. Let's say this is perfectly halal and fine and it doesn't support any, evil entities and corporations and so on, right? Who promote the most immoral acts. The most immoral acts are being promoted, and I wear their label and become a walking, talking advertisement for them. Could you ever imagine Ar-Rubab, Salamullahi alayha, doing this? Not just out of being careless towards the world and being an ascetic and zuhud and whatnot, but could you ever imagine someone like Layla, the mother of Ali al-Akbar, the wife of Imam al-Hussein, and the wives of the companions of Imam al-Hussein wearing these labels? Even if it wasn't haram and the money was halal and all the rest of it, all the boxes are checked. And if you say, no, I can't imagine them doing this, just as you wouldn't imagine the wife of a living marja doing it, let alone those noble ladies, what do you think is the difference? The difference is, on the one hand, you have someone who has more intellect than me, right? And so they buy the bag or the shoe or the dress or whatever it is, and then God forbid there's a tiny little stain somewhere and they lose it. What comes to your mind when you see a scene like that? You'd be like, what's the big deal? Come on, it's just a tiny stain. We can remove it. Or it's a little tear, right? Your immediate reaction is that, come on, have some aql. Have some aql. Anyway, we've run out of time. Inshallah, we'll pick this up tomorrow and give some more practical examples and stories from the lives of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. What we should be able to do is train ourselves, train our intellect to think big picture. Think big picture. This dunya is but a bridge. It's just a tunnel, a tiny process that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created like a child going from the world of his mother's womb into the world of the dunya. The actual birthing process is complicated. It's tough. But it's just a tiny part of this person's life. Overall journey. You should see the bigger picture. You should see that this dunya is just not worth it. The more things I have that I'm so obsessed with and attached to makes my departure from this world all the more difficult, because I'm letting all of this go. Whereas the less you have, the better off you are. Amma zuhduka fi dunya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to one of his prophets of Bani Israel, he says, Amma zuhduka fi dunya fayu'ajjiluka ar-raha. The more comfortable you are in this world, it gives you comfort. It gives you less things to worry about. A billionaire once told my father, he said to him, how much money do you earn? My father said, I don't know, let's say $1,000 a month or whatever. He said, you know what? I'm so envious of you because God forbid there's a conflict somewhere at the other side of the world and the price of oil jumps 50 cents. I have a near heart attack. God forbid something happens in the New York Stock Exchange and stocks begin to fall and I have nearly a stroke. God forbid something goes wrong and my life is miserable because I have all of this money. I have shipping lines. I have companies all over the world. My point is, look at the bigger picture and fight those urges, those obsessions, those materialistic tendencies. Abul Fadl al-Abbas, before he became the top lieutenant in the army of Imam al-Hussein and the greatest warrior to have ever lived after the Imams, to the point that Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam says, Inna li'ammi al-Abbas manzilatan yawm al-qiyamah yaghbituhu alayha jami'u al-shuhada. He has a position that is envied not by regular folk and individuals like me who are worth nothing. If you had someone who was so rich that the richest of the rich were envious of him, you know that person is truly rich. If you have a scholar that the greatest scholars are envious of him, it tells you this person is truly special. All of the martyrs on the day of judgment are envious. Envious not in a negative sense, but a positive sense. They feel how lucky he is. يَغْبِطُهُ عَلَيْهَا جَمِيعُ الشُّهَدَاء. Before Abbas became this warrior against the enemy, he was a warrior against himself. How do we know that? He speaks to himself multiple times on the day of Ashura, which tells you that he was in the process of training himself for this day and for this moment and for this exact specific action that he took, which became immortalized throughout history. The fact that he was able to fill his blessed hand with water. By the way, some have said he didn't actually reach for the water. It's not that he was tempted بِأَبِي هُوَ وَأُمِّي to drink from the stream. Rather, it is when he filled the container, his hand carried a little bit of water in it. Abul Fadl al-Abbas never even thought about drinking. Sadbar, this is a beautiful Farsi line of poetry which describes the mentality of Abbas. Sadbar agar al-qamara baz konam har bar dobare tashne bar mi garda. If I conquered the Al-Qamah 100 times, every single time I'll come back thirsty. ألف مرة وشيل الماي ورد لحسين ظمآن وما أبدل رأي. He looks at the water. يا نفس. Again, he's training himself. من بعد الحسين هوني وبعده ما كنت أو تكوني. هذا الحسين وارد المنون وتشربين بارد المعين. You want to quench your thirst when Hussein is thirsty. No one would have blamed you, Ya Abul Fadl al-Abbas, Ya ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen. If you had had a drink, you might have been able to muster up more energy. No one would have blamed you, and yet, this is him resisting that temptation. This is one time when he addresses his nafs and he fights his nafs and he resists and restrains his nafs. The other time is when he said, his call was heard throughout the battlefield. يا نفس لا تخشي من الكفار يا نفس لا تخشي من الكفار وأبشري برحمة الجبار قد قطعوا ببغيهم يساري. They have just cut off my left hand. Imagine Abu Abdullah hearing this, his little brother Abbas declaring that my right hand is severed, my left hand was also cut off. Maybe he's trying in his own way while being ashamed to tell Abu Abdullah, I'm so sorry you sent me on a mission. When Abu al-Fadl came to Abu Abdullah saying to him, لَقَدْ ضَاقَ صَدْرِي وَسَئِمْتُ الْحَيَاةِ. May Allah grant us the tawfiq and the rizq of feeling that our chests are constricted for the Imam of our time. لقد ضاق صدري وسئمت الحياة. Imam al-Hussein responds to him by saying, أخي أنت حامل لوائي أنت كبش كتيبتي. You are my standard bearer, you are my flag bearer. إن أنت قتلت فرق عني جمعي. If you're gone, my entire army will collapse. I say to him, Ya Abu Abdullah, what army do you speak of? They'd already gone. All you had left was Abbas. And Hussein would say, exactly, Abbas was my one-man army. But Imam al-Hussein saw that Abu al-Fadl was already flying. He was already being lifted off the ground. There was no point in keeping him anymore. So he says to him, إن كان ولا بد فاطلب لهؤلاء الأطفال شربة من ماء. If you must go, then fetch some water for the children. He headed straight towards the riverbank. I will conclude with this. Every other member of Bani Hashim, before they head out into the battlefield, they went and bid farewell to the women and children. Al-Qasim, Ali al-Akbar, and others. They all said their goodbyes. The only one who didn't was Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, because everyone expected that he was only going to get water back to the camp. I can imagine women surrounding Rabab and telling her, don't worry, Uncle Abbas is going to bring water for you and for Ali. But when he came back, when Imam al-Hussein came back, they noticed his hand was on his back. الآن انكسر ظهري وقلت حيلتي وشمت بي عدوي. The enemy were cheering and clapping. لقد قتلنا العباس. Hussein is now all alone. We can do whatever we want. Imam al-Hussein came back. Abata, Amma, where is our Uncle Abbas? We've been waiting for him. The children each have their cup in their hand, waiting for Uncle Abbas to come back. Imam al-Hussein didn't say anything. He simply went to the tent of Abbas. He removed the pillar. It fell to the ground. Lady Zaynab crawled out. Wa Abbasah wa ضيعتنا بعدك. Imam al-Hussein echoed her statement. He said, نعم وضيعتنا بعدك. يقولها يا سكنة راح عباس. راح الضغم اللي يرفع الراس. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر. اجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه ومقوية سلطانه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وخدمة الحسين، وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين. اللهم ارحم موتانا، خاصة موتى هذا الجمع والعلماء والشهداء والصالحين وخدمة أبي عبد الله الحسين إلى أرواحهم نهدي ثواب المجلس وثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.